Welcome back. Psychedelics have been one of the buzziest topics in tech, from the entrepreneurs that openly take them at work, microdosing, to the startups trying to get them approval for medical reasons. Our Kate Rooney is here with this multi-layered story.
A lot going on here, Dee. But if you think about psychedelics, you hear that word, you might think Woodstock, you might think about the 60s, but these drugs are entering the medical mainstream as companies chase FDA approval and entrepreneurs use them to gain an edge. Psilocybin, that's the active ingredient in psychedelic drugs like mushrooms, is being tested for treatment of mental illness. Researchers at Harvard and Mass General are among those studying the compounds. And despite a stigma around some of these drugs, they say there's proven upside.
For those that it does help, it seems to have a tremendous impact. Because these are folks who've tried other medications that just haven't worked for them. And so, and this provides them the first relief that they've known in a long time.
This space is attracting traditional biotech investors. A flood of venture capital money poured in back in 2020. It's really fallen off, though, in recent quarters. The publicly traded names, though, are benefiting from a recent recovery in biotech. They tend to be pretty much a binary bet on drug approval. But one founder telling me that they lag the broader sector because they might still be too controversial for big pharma.
So if you look at what dominates biotech investing at the moment, it's like looking for those companies who are very soon, hopefully, be taken out by pharma. So the fact that pharma is very hesitant to move into psychedelics takes that fantasy, so to say, or that catalyst, that near-term catalyst away.
Christian Engemeyer, who you just heard from there, says that some investors have been skeptical about some of the hype around these stocks. He compared it to what we see with AI or blockchain. And while the success of these companies very much relies on FDA approval, some entrepreneurs are not waiting. Luxury retreats like Myco Meditations in Jamaica is where they're going. They can run you anywhere from $7,000 to $20,000 for a week. They go there sometimes to treat depression or use psilocybin to find deeper meaning.
Beyond the pure therapeutic approach, those people that need to perhaps step back a bit from life and take a broad view, be it the business that they run or be it their life in general, these big therapeutic doses of psilocybin can certainly help create that perspective, lead to more creative flow of ideas.
Doctors and experts we spoke to expect FDA approval within the next 5 years or so. The FDA also granted breakthrough therapy status to psilocybin and MDMA. That acknowledges the drug's potential and can streamline the approval process. Dee.
That's a fascinating report. Kate, talk to me a little bit more about this recreational side. You hear about VCs, founders, especially here in the Bay Area, taking it at work and just, daily. Is that microdosing?
I think you'd call that microdosing. I guess it depends on how much they're taking, but it seems to have become very much socially acceptable here. And one of the things that Myco Meditations was talking about, the CEO there was saying that it's word of mouth. People are comfortable talking about this now at dinner parties, at cocktail parties, and they talk about the benefits if they've had, used this to treat depression or had some sort of episode and have actually found benefits from this. He said it's very different from just taking normal drugs and normal prescribed drugs to say, I actually did this, and by the way, you can go to this retreat or you can go to someone in the U.S. It's very much done here in the U.S., even with therapists, sort of underground.
Right, but we live in California, and we communicate a lot with VC investors, et cetera. So it almost feels normal to us to hear about this and talk about sort of the benefits, but in other parts of the country, I cannot imagine.
I'm sure some people's eyes are popping at this, and it does start to feel very normal, although it has been happening, for decades. You think of Steve Jobs, really one of the forefathers of tech out here. He was very open about his use of psychedelics and really attributed that and some of his creativity to those drugs.
But a lot of folks will write that off as, okay, tech guy, entrepreneur who's doing this. But again, is there sort of an analogy you can draw to cannabis use, right? A decade ago, it was less acceptable in some circles, yes, but now you're seeing state after state.
It's really interesting that some of the investors in this space really want to draw the line and say, we're actually not cannabis, we're very different. This is supposed to be used for medical treatment and not for recreation. And they really warn against using it recreationally and treating it too lightly and saying it actually can be quite dangerous if you go and you macrodose or you take too much. And they try to draw the line, but where there is a big analogy and some quite strong parallels is with the regulatory environment. It's sort of a state-by-state approach. You're seeing some of these drugs being approved in Oregon and Colorado. It's more likely that you see the state level approve it, similar to what we saw with cannabis.
One of the charts you just showed us in that piece, it was venture capital funding, right?
Yep.
Looked like it dropped off a cliff.
Pretty much.
These are the people using it, talking about all of its positive effects, looking for approval, et cetera. Why has that fallen so much?
Seems like the hype cycle. They said a couple years ago, you saw, similar to what we saw with AI and blockchain, companies really just slapping psychedelics on their name because they wanted to get in on that. That has really dried up. Some of those companies went public, and then valuations have dried up. This is a quite speculative area of biotech. You've seen it in public markets. Risk is drying up, and you're seeing that in venture capital. It's been a lot harder to raise money and a lot harder to raise money for projects that aren't profitable either.
As we've talked about this in a lot of different areas.